undo the caliper hose bracket. It's a 13mm socket. Dismount the caliper, 7mm Allen head. You have 2 brackets or 2 sliders for the caliper mounting to the knuckle. Top and the bottom. The pin came right out. Lift your caliper right off the bracket. Now I'm going to use a caliper hanger because I'm going to hang this out of the way. Then I can remove the rotor. Remove the cotter pin to the upper ball joint castle nut. I'll just take that right out. I'm going to spray with penetrating spray on the upper ball joint bolts. So hopefully it's a little bit easier when we get to it. So this nut happens to be a 22mm. I'm going to use a 22mm wrench. Break that free. There we go. Don't take the nut all the way out without supporting the actual lower control arm and spring. So in order to do an upper ball joint or a lower ball joint, you have to have support underneath this lower control arm because it's spring loaded. This is not strut, it is rear wheel drive, so this spring is connected by the ball joints for the 2 control arms. So I'm going to use a tranny jack. If you're at home, you can jack it up and use a floor jack or leave the jack underneath the control arm, but you must support it. So now we can remove the nut completely with the support there. I'm going to leave it on just a couple of threads because I'm going to use a pickle fork and break that free. I'm going to use a pry bar and I'm going to pull down on the upper control arm and take the nut off the rest of the way. And that way I can slowly guide it up so there's no big drop. So now it's freed from the knuckle, and this has been replaced before, so these are the way it comes aftermarket. And I'm going to take the nuts off. If you happen to have a factory ball joint still, you're going to have these press-in rivets. The way to get rid of those is you can use a cutting wheel, grind them off, use a pneumatic chisel with an air gun and chisel them off. Or if you have a torch, you can cut them off. Just be careful with torching because you don't want to damage the control arm. So we have a 15mm nut and a 17mm wrench. So actually we have a 15mm socket and a 17mm wrench. So just remove all 3 nuts and bolts. Make sure your surface is clean, no layers of rust. Take your new ball joint, remove the new castle nut, remove that. And you're going to place it on the top there and get your new nuts and bolts. So new ball joint, line it up. The reason why the bolts actually went up like this, not down, is from the excess bolt right here on the side. You'll see the excess amount. When this control arm comes down, it only leaves about a 1/2 inch to 1/8 of an inch clearance. So those bolts have a tendency to hit. So make sure you place the new bolts upward. That's just to put it on there. Put all 3 on, same way, bolt up and nut on the top. These are locking nuts, so you don't need to use any thread locker. So same as the old one, 17mm wrench on the bottom and 15mm socket on the top. And because the factory ones are riveted, the aftermarket, they have that locking nut. So basically there's no torque spec. So we're just going to tighten it right up. I'm going to put a long pry bar in the upper control arm and then just pull it down enough to get it started. Upper ball joint castle nut, 60 foot-pounds. Paying attention to the cutout hole for the cotter pin. We're going to line that up also. It's okay to go a little bit over once you reach the torque if it doesn't line up. Yeah, we're going to have to go a little over. run the cotter pin through. New cotter pin comes with it. Make sure you use that. Now everything's secure, tightened and torqued. We can lower the stand down from the lower control arm. So now we can put our rotor back on. Take our caliper down from the hanging bracket. Line your pads up. So you got to get these pads to sit down in the grooves of the bracket. And there we go. We can put our slider pins in. And just get the pin started. There we go. I did add some new caliper grease to the sliders because it's always good to put fresh grease on them. Both caliper slider pins is 26 foot-pounds. Now we can install the bolt for the brake hose bracket. That's a 13mm socket. And anytime you do any sort of suspension work, whether it's ball joints or tire ends, steering, don't forget to always get a proper alignment done. Now I'm going to torque the wheel, 21mm socket. Torque spec is 85 to 110. I'm going to do it at 100, and I'm going to do it in a star pattern.